finished our journey of the 7 churches of Asia that the Apostle John wrote from the Isle of Patmos, starting at Ephesus and then going to Smyrna, and then up to Pergamum, Thyatira, starting heading south to Sardis, and then Philadelphia, and then finally Laodicea. And on Wednesday night, we had a review of those, and I just wanted to point out for a while, I don't want to get too far ahead into Revelation 21 and 22, but we're going to get a little far ahead in Revelation 21 and 22, a little bit, when we talk about a new city, or another city, maybe a better way to say it, another city, a city that we're all wanting to go to. That's why we're here today. So we want to see what the Bible says about this city. Sometimes it's called Zion, sometimes it's called just the word Jerusalem, and sometimes it's called the New Jerusalem. Those are synonymous, I think, in different contexts in the Bible. And did the 7 churches of Asia, did they need encouragement? They surely did. Do we need that same encouragement? We surely do. Surely do. So all the bad things that they were going through, where literally over a period of 300 years, there were hundreds of thousands of Christians that were killed, that were martyred in all various ways. So I've heard, the high number I've heard is maybe as many as 1 million were killed for the cause. So, and he even said to some of them, some of you are going to die too, he says, in Revelation 2 and 3. So they needed that hope, and we need that hope as well. In fact, he says several times that he that overcomes, there's some overcoming to be done. He that overcomes. So let's talk a little bit. Now, before I even get, maybe I'll back up one step. When you get to Revelation 21, there are some authors that say that he's talking about the church itself there only. And I wouldn't be adamant about it. There's some benefits or some things there that I think would lend itself to that a little bit. I think he's talking about in symbolic terms. Number one, we can't understand that other side till we get to the other side. So I think he uses terms that our minds can grasp and hold on to. Is the city literally 1,400 miles high, 1,400 miles wide, and 1,400 miles long? No. I think that indicates the vastness of it. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little while. And oh, by the way, another thing, if that's literal, that's going to be hard to fit that into Palestine. When he comes back and they say and sets up a literal kingdom there, and if this is all literal, 1,400 miles, every direction would cover the Middle East, not just that little country of Israel. So he can't mean that literally, but he uses literal terms for our little Forrest Gump minds to get around and to see how he describes this new Jerusalem. So we're going to, a few caveats there, I know that, but let's talk about the city that we're all going to, because we saw some cities on the 7 churches of Asia tour that most of them we wouldn't want to live there. This one we do. And I'm actually going to read a few things this morning, particularly to get started. If you would turn to Hebrews 11. We'll go to Hebrews 11, then we'll go to a little bit on Hebrews 12, my bad. Hebrews 11 and verse 8 through 10, follow with me. Of course, the great Hall of Fame, Hebrews 11, talking about Abraham. By faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to the place which he would receive as an inheritance. And he went out not knowing where he was going. By faith, he dwelt in the land of promise as in a foreign country, and notice, dwelling in tents, with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. For he waited for the city, which has foundations, whose builder and maker is God. It's interesting that some versions, I think the New American Standard especially, if you've got that version, when he says the builder and maker in our language, well, that's the same, it's describing the same thing, not really. The maker there is the word architect in the New American Standard, maybe others. It says that God is the architect. He's the planner. He's the one that came up with the concept. And he's very symmetrical. We see that even in the Old Testament. He's very detailed. He's not only the architect, but he's the builder. He's the maker of all of this. And then compare that when he says that the foundations. What kind of foundation did Abraham live on? What kind of foundation did he have? Sand, temporary. So he compares and contrasts here that this is not like Abraham. We're not going to, we're not going to be living in a tent, and we're not going to be living on sand. That this great architect of the universe and the builder of the universe, along with his son, we're going to have a solid foundation where we're going if we stay faithful. Now, jump over to just one chapter to Hebrews 12. Hebrews 12, and we'll start with verse 22. We'll read 3 or 4 verses there as a kind of a prep. Now, he just talked about when the law came down, how people were terrified. In fact, what was the reaction to the Jews when they saw up on the mountain all the smoke and the quaking? And did they say, this is awesome. We hope to see this again? What did they say?
Moses, you talk to God.
Please don't let us see this again, because we fear and quake. Moses was afraid and came back with the veil and all of that. So they didn't want any part of that God again, as far as face to face. Okay, they said it was terrifying. We exceedingly quake, afraid and trembling. Now look at verse 22. But you have come to Mount Zion and to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, to an innumerable company of angels, to the general assembly and church of the firstborn, now notice, who are registered in heaven, to God the judge of all, to the spirits of just men made perfect, to Jesus, the mediator of the new covenant, and to the blood of sprinkling that speaks better things than that of Abel, who are registered in heaven. What some of the other similar phrases have we heard already in the first 2 or 3 chapters? Registered in heaven. We'll see it toward the end, too.
Written in the book.
Written in the book. And then in 22, toward the end, the book of life. The book of life. Registered in heaven. Yeah. What connotation do you get from that? Is that a scary thing, or is that a comforting thing that we, faithful Christians, are registered in heaven, that they are written in God's book of life? He's not going to forget me. That is exactly right. Does he know our names? God knows your name. He knows your name. It's registered in heaven. Now, there's a possibility, if we don't keep at it, that he can blot our names out. But he knows your name. He knows my name. We are registered in heaven. Now, registration in the first century, well, any of that general time frame, was a big deal. In Luke 2, I believe, Luke 2, when Joseph went back with Mary, with the baby Jesus who wasn't born yet, to be registered, to confirm their registry. You were registered as a citizen of a city then, and that was a big deal. It had a lot of privileges with it. It used to mean a lot in this country. Now it doesn't. You were registered to vote. Doesn't mean anything anymore. But it did then. They were registered as citizens of that city and that country. And Jesus said, "You're registered in that country up there, and God knows your name, and you're a citizen there." Questions or comments so far? Don.
If you go back to the law and look at the registry, when they were registered, it was identified as what tribe they were in and what inheritance in the promised land was theirs. And they were considered to be a full citizen, acceptable to go into worship. And one of the problems coming back out of Babylonian captivity, some of them had lost that registry. And the records were no longer there. And therefore, there were a lot of them that wanted to be priests and wanted to be things that were not allowed because their name was not registered. So we have got a name that is described here, registered in heaven, which as an heir along with Jesus gives us kind of like a deed of trust. That's ours.
It's a big deal, isn't it? It was a big deal then. It's a big deal now to have our names registered in heaven. And God knows us personally. It's a big deal. In Revelation chapter 21 and 22, here again, this is for our feeble minds to be able to grasp. I tried to, even when we studied the 7 churches of Asia a few years ago, I did not have this. I got 3 aspects of this New Jerusalem, 3 overarching aspects of the New Jerusalem that I want to fill in some of the flesh underneath those bones. It's interesting that I call the first one fellowship. This New Jerusalem, we have the concept of fellowship. Before, in 21 verses 1 through 7, and we're going to get into actually some of these individual verses in a minute. I'm just trying to hit at kind of a high level at this point. What was the tabernacle? It says that in this New Jerusalem, God is going to be our tabernacle, going to be our temple. What was the tabernacle, by the way? Okay, it was a tent, wasn't it? Now, it was elaborate. God said, I want you this, you got to do all these things in a way that I choose, and all the different colors. And did the average person have access to the tabernacle? No. Did not. Just the tribe of Levi, right? And just some of them, sons of Aaron. So you just didn't walk in. You had the holy place and the most holy place. You didn't go in and say, I've always wondered what went on back here. Well, that's your last day. That's your last day on the earth. It had to be carried, and even by poles, you could not touch it. So I want you to keep that picture in mind as we contrast that to the New Jerusalem. When it says that they're, look in verse 1, Revelation 21 and verse 1. Now I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away. Now notice. And there was no more sea. What do oceans and seas and, well, even rivers on a smaller degree, lakes, what does that generally do? It separates or divides, doesn't it? Now, under the tabernacle and even in the temple, which we'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit, there was a separation. God's people were separated. there was this barrier, if you will, this sea under the old law. Now, that old law was done away when Jesus died on the cross, Colossians 2 and other places. In this new Jerusalem, this new heaven, this new earth, this Mount Zion, this mental, very elaborate picture that Jesus is painting for us, he says there's no more sea. So what does that imply in this, our new home one day? Rick?
The purpose of the sea was for priests to cleanse themselves. In fact, now that we are considered, in my mind, a royal priesthood, we're already cleansed, taking on Christ.
Really good. The lavers, they would have to wash in these things before the priest could go in, this ceremonial cleansing, and before they could have access. Here, there's no more of that. We will have access to God himself in this new Jerusalem, because Hebrews does call us priests, a royal priesthood with our great high priest Jesus. So priests have access. Under the new law, we have access, and when we die, we're going to be with him. There's not going to be any more barriers, any more sea. He goes on to say that I will be your God and you will be my son or daughter. We're going to know him. He's going to put this stamp on our forehead, so to speak, that we're his, and he's going to live among us, or we're going to live among him. Maybe it's a better way to say it. It's his place. And there's not going to be any more separation. Is that comforting? Compare that to before. It said, we don't even want to see that ever again, all this quaking and so on, to the point where we're going to be with him, sitting with him, sitting at his feet, worshiping him. Now, what are we going to do there? I don't know. I got a feeling I'm going to be singing. I'm going to be a tenor singer and going to be one of the best. That's my goal, was to always be a tenor singer, and I can't carry a tune. Well, I'm not as bad as Tom Bourne, but I'm a little better than that, but not by much. Sorry, Homer. But there's going to be singing and worshiping and conversation and all these great things. Now, you hear these people talk, well, we're going to be able to golf, and that probably got the best fishing. We're not golfing and fishing there. Or anything else. It's going to be a great rock band because of all these heathen that died. Forget about that. We're going to be among God, with God and his son, and we're going to be worshiping, and I got a feeling we're going to walk around most of the time going, wow. Now, if that doesn't appeal to you, don't know about that. Don't know about that. But we're going to have access to him, and to me, that's just a wonderful thought. We're going to have access to this architect who built this place for you and me if we stay faithful. Gary.
Chapter 22 in Revelation, verse 3 says that we will serve him.
Mm-hmm.
So there's going to be some action
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. Someone turned to Psalms 84 and verse 10. And somebody may say, I was hoping you'd bring that up, or somebody would. Well, wait. Serving, that sounds like work. Well, when you get to Psalms 84 and verse 10, somebody has a loud voice, read that. Doug, real loud. Psalms 84 and verse 10, and see how David viewed all of that. Go ahead.
For a day in your courts is better than 1,000. I'd rather be a bookkeeper in the house of God than dwell in the tents of wickedness.
Okay. David said, one day with God's better than 1,000. And he said, I'd rather be a doorkeeper in the temple of God than spend my time with all these other things and other people. That if God wants me to open doors for people, You got your man. I'll be glad to do that. Service, yes, but it's going to be wonderful. And David said, he said, I'd rather be a doorkeeper in God's kingdom. Going to be okay. What are we going to do 100%? We're going to serve him. We're going to praise him. And after that, it's up to him. But I want to go there. You know, Paul said, I don't know what we're going to be like, but I know this. We're going to be like him. That should be good enough. Lance, real quick, and then Ryan, real quick. No, we're all good.
Verse 4 basically says all the things that we don't like about work aren't going to be there. And that's the pain, the suffering, the sorrow. That's not going to be there. So if you've ever done something that you like, it's considered work. But I'll tell you what, time sure flies when you're having fun.
Yes, it does. Good point. So we've had fellowship. I think we established that without any doubt. And there's going to be protection there. I find that interesting. Number one, God's there. I'm good with that. We can all go home now. There's a great high wall. A great high wall. And it's interesting that it says it's measured by an angel's forearm. That's how they measured stuff then. How long was an angel's forearm? I don't know. Big. I'll go with big. But it talks about being 144 cubits, which is 210 feet, if I remember my math. But some even say that's the depth, that's the width of the wall. Can you imagine a wall? I lean toward that versus the height. It's going to be high, so to speak, for our minds. Protection. God said, I'm going to protect you. Don't worry about it. You're not being, you're going through all these terrible things on the earth right now, but there's a day coming when you'll be at my house, and there's a great and high wall. I'll be there, and it's secure. He says there's 12 gates, symmetrical, 3 on every side. Now, what's there? Angel is there at each gate for our minds. Number one, the gates never close. And the gates, each gate is a pearl, one pearl. Pretty impressive. Never seen one that big. So there's an angel guarding all the gates. This is for these people that are going through all this and for us going through it all. The measurement of the city is a perfect cube. There's the symmetry of God again. It's as high as it is long as it is wide. Protected. There's no temple needed there. Well, why not? Why is there not a temple? God's the temple. Jesus is the temple. And all the implications of temple. Worship. Access. Blessings. All of that. We're not going to need any physical structure anymore, whether it's a tabernacle or a temple. We got God. That's enough. And that's what he's saying here. Well, oh boy, what are we going to do for light? God and his Son will be the light. What 3 things do we need to live on this earth? Got to have them. We think, well, you got to have color TV. No. Got to have an iPhone 12, right? No. Food, water, food, and light. Can you grow with those 3 things? Well, we do. We're going to see those in the next slide or two, some of that, where the tree of life, water, what Jesus say in John 2 or John 4, I believe maybe John 4, the woman at the well, she's going and she said, well, I'm just going to get thirsty again. We all do. We all got to drink water in the desert. But guess what? When you drink it, you got to have more. Jesus said, I'm the water. You drink of me, you'll never be thirsty again. So, in fact, not only what 3 things do you have to live, what 3 things are you the most scared of? Darkness? Fire? Water. Lord destroyed the world the first time with water. Well, they all drowned. The second one is going to be with fire and what else? The blackness of darkness. That's what hell is going to be. You're going to be on fire, but it's going to be so black, and so it doesn't. The Bible, he doesn't say just black or dark. He said the blackness of darkness. So what are we scared of? What are scared? I didn't mean to say scared. That's Kentucky. Scared of darkness, drowning, and burning. What does it take to live? Water, food, and light. So there's a big contrast. So I don't think these things are accidental. And oh, by the way, well, what's going to keep these dealers and everything slipping in this place? Those days are gone. Do we have gates with angels? Yes. That's the picture we got. But it goes on to say there's nothing that defiles is going to come into my city. Remember when he talks about the cowardly, the unbelieving, the homosexual, all these things. Not going to be there. Now, Ryan, you had a comment. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, if you want a glimpse, and it's just a glimpse, go to chapter 4. I mean, and this is just a throne room. About a rainbow surrounding the throne. Jasper. We all know what this stuff kind of looks like. And holy, holy, holy. God Almighty, we're going to be saying that.
That's right.
That's what we're going to be doing.
That's what we'll be doing. And if you notice too, I'm sitting reading this week, that it talks about the walls. We'll get to that in a second. Of the different, the 12 stones with built on the 12 apostles, and there's like jasper and hyacinth and all these things, and all that's beautiful. Is it more beautiful on the inside? Absolutely. A street of gold. Is gold real heavy? Yeah, 6, 8, 10 times heavier than a rock. Is gold shine? Yes, it shines. Does it tarnish? No, it doesn't. Can you see through gold? No. This picture says it's so shiny you can see through it. That's the gold there. That's interesting in itself, that study. So not only these other things, but he says, there are provisions there. I'm going to provide for you there. Touched on a little bit already. Where does this water proceed from? From the throne. And it flows from his throne, and that's the water of life. Now, it says on either side of the throne, I'm not quite sure how the tree of life is on both sides of the water, but here's what I think, that there's one tree of life and it's shaded, or the branches go over both sides. That's the only thing I could come up with. Otherwise, you got two trees of life. But anyway, you have the source of water, we have the source of food. God says, I'm going to provide for you. Don't worry about that. I'm going to provide for you. The provisions are that we'll see God's face. What does that look like? I don't know. It'd be too great to even describe. What did God do with Paul when he, in 2 Corinthians 12, when he went up to the third heaven? What did he see there? I don't know. But it was so wonderful that what did God do to Paul? He gave him a thorn in the flesh, remember that? Because he said, yeah, I've seen wonderful, wonderful things, and to keep me humble, God gave me a thorn in the flesh. And he said, I asked God 3 times to remove this. It must have been that bad. God said, my grace is sufficient for you. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. So we'll see God's face. No one has seen God's face on this earth and lived. The Bible talks about that. His name will be on our foreheads, as it were, denoting ownership. He said, I'm going to provide. Has he always provided for us? Think about it. He has. He has. A lot of crazy things going on in the world, yes. But does he provide for us? Old Testament writer said, I've never seen saints begging for food. He'll provide for us. What did Jesus say in Matthew 6? You're worried about a lot of stuff here, people, he's saying, basically. Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these other things will be added to you. They didn't promise we'd be rich, but he says, I promise that you'll have enough. I promise you'll have enough. And as even Brian mentioned in his lesson this morning with Mary and Martha, two of his best friends, along with Lazarus, he said, Martha, Martha, you're worried about many things. She was waiting on them, and he didn't say you're doing what wrong, but he said Mary's done, she's taken the higher road. She wants to hear more about me and less about the preparing of food and all. But he says, I'll take care of you. Now, either we have faith that he will or we don't. The presence of God. The presence and fellowship with God forms the essential feature of the age to come. And that goes back to what we were saying earlier. And I'd let that sink in a little bit. The presence and fellowship with God is going to be the essential feature of heaven. There'll be, someone pointed out, there's no death, no sorrow, no crying. Well, how's he going to do all that? I don't know. What if my child or my grandmother or whatever didn't make it? Well, I'll worry about them the whole time. No, you won't. I don't know. He just says there'll be no sorrow, no pain, no crying in heaven. Now, were those things going on then? Are those things going on now? Yes, absolutely they are. But when we cross over, we go through that next door. When that next door opens, called death, and we go through on the other side, those days are past, as Gary.
With that thought in mind, can anybody comment on chapter 22, verse 2, the leaves being for the healing of the nation?
Yes.
I'm puzzled by that.
Well, I did a little study on that this week, and then here again, Sean's going to be teaching this, or here I want, when we get to it, I don't want to get too far ahead, but I think this is part of the, it says it bore 12 fruits, the tree of life. I think it's under the general context of food. Remember the food, water, light? He just said in verse 1 about the water of life, and then he talks about the tree of life that you will be able to eat from and never get hungry again. And then I think that's almost metaphorical for the healing of the nations, the healing of the people that are there, this food source, I think. That's the best I could come up with. We've touched on some of this, but I underlined what I thought was important. First John 3 and verse 2. 1 John, I want you to go there. We're down to 5 minutes. 1 John 3 and verse 2. Oh, by the way, Sean, Wednesday night we have singing, and then Sean will pick this up for the next several months when he gets back, starting at Revelation 4. 1 John 3 and verse 2, I said Paul said this. John said it. Beloved, now we are children of God, and it has not yet been revealed what we shall be. But we know that when he is revealed, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. What are we going to be like? You go to 1 Corinthians 15, when it talks about the body. What kind of body are we going to have? Well, that's as close as I think we can get in 1 Corinthians 15. It's like dropping a piece of corn in the ground. It dies, just like we got to die. And then this tremendous shoot comes up. It don't look like that corn. That's going to be our body. I don't know. But we'll find out one day. And that's going to be wonderful. Here's the picture, net, bottom line, as we walk away. Heaven is strong. It's beautiful. It's spacious. Well, there are going to be millions of people there. That's correct. Well, there's going to be room. Don't worry about the room. It's going to be all right. strong, spacious, beautiful, perfect city, dwelling in perfect fellowship with our perfect God. And I think all anybody could say there is amen. And we look forward to the day when we can hear him say, "Well done, good and faithful servant, enter into the joys of your Lord." Welcome to the holy city. Can you imagine the homecoming that's going to be with all these angels, tens of thousands, ever how many he's got of angels? And I suspect, I think it inclinates a couple of places, I didn't write that down, but I studied this week, that they're going to be welcoming us home. When you get over in the book of Hebrews, Hebrews chapter 1, I think it's the last verse, if I remember right, when it said angels angels are servants for you and me. They are messengers. What's their role? I don't know. But they help us. And can you imagine walking through that great gate one day and angels by the thousands welcoming you home? So as Brian said this morning, is it worth it? You got to ask yourself that. Luke 14, count the cost. That's up to you. Some it's not worth it for this life, or to attach to this life. We do have maybe, Don, I had 1 or 2 more minutes, and then when the next one rings, we're done.
Just back to the tree of life.
Okay.
It's one tree, but the way it's described, it's branching out to provide 12 manners of fruit. And the leaves, you being from Middle Kentucky, you've had sassafras tea.
I have.
You use the leaves for curing the ailments. So the ailments of humanity and his physical body are all going to be gone by the same tree that gives us life.
I think that's true. And that certainly ties in, is consistent with everything else, wasn't it? No crying, no healing, no sickness, no dying. So the medicinal purposes and all of that, once we eat of that tree, and I think it does cascade over to on both sides of the river of life. And will we physically eat it? I don't know. Maybe. Will we physically drink the water that comes from his throne? Maybe. I don't know. But I know it's going to be wonderful. And I thank you for clarifying that, Don. I think you're 100% correct. Gary, and then we'll stop.
It was the word nations in that verse that puzzled me, because I think when we got first.
Well, people are coming from all nations.
Separated us,
Yes.
the different nations.
They'll be saved there from all nations. And that's the way I think what it means, Gary. People, different people. I also think that could be, by the way, before everybody gets here, why there's 12 gates. 12 gates covers 360 degrees, obviously, north, east, south, west. And everyone's going to have access to this picture we just painted, God just painted for us. And it doesn't matter if you're from Africa or wherever you're from, you'll have access to this if you follow me. I believe that's why versus just one gate. Now, will it be 12 gates? Probably not. But for our minds, we all have access through these 12 gates, whatever direction we live on the planet. I think that's what that means. Thank you, and look forward to Sean taking over the class next Sunday, Lord willing.